In the Newsroom is a production in partnership with Studio Stillwater. Every week, journalists from the Stillwater News Press invite listeners to join us in the newsroom and hear the story behind the stories.
Hello, welcome to In the Newsroom. This is part 2 of our episode, Welcoming Our Allies, Afghan Resettlement in Stillwater. In this episode, we will be listening to the second half of my interview with Salman Rafique, a graduate student at Oklahoma State University from Pakistan who has been volunteering in the resettlement effort. And here's part 2.
Okay. So, adjusting to America's kind of more individualistic, we'll split the check kind of culture.
Yeah.
Must have taken a little bit of time.
Oh, it took me some time. But it's the same thing that happened with me. When I arrived here, there were like a couple of Pakistanis here, and they just told me, this is how it is done. And this is not lack of respect or lack of courtesy. It's just the way it is. And then you learn to respect cultures. You learn to you adapt these cultural norms, and you try and blend in. It's about respecting the culture. But I'm prepared to do that because people did that for me. I was accepted, and then I started adapting. And that's what I see for these families. They've been uprooted. I can't even imagine how one would feel if they couldn't go back to their home.
Absolutely. So when we see people out and about town, what's the proper way to approach them?
To be honest, they're some of the most hospitable people, and they are very warm-hearted. They would just reach out. They would be very social generally. They're wonderful hosts to tell you that, and they're generous. No matter what, even if you go to meet a refugee family now in Tulsa or Stillwater, they would try and share whatever they have with you because that's part of the culture. So when they meet you in public, that's what happens. But there are sometimes minor things. For instance, when I came here, I've been raised not to look women in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
I would look down. That's out of respect. That's how I've been raised. So sometimes, one of my professors once asked me, why do you do this? And I was like, no, there is no other reason. It's just that I'm trying to adapt, but it will take some time. I've been told that people older than me and women, when I meet them, I'll keep my eyes down. So it's these minor gestures that sometimes get interpreted as, as probably disrespectful. But that's exactly the point. When you meet them on the streets, they're probably men. We hug, men hug, but there is no cross-gender touching or anything. Even the space, the idea of personal space is different. If I'm sitting with you, I'll probably sit at a distance. Yeah, it takes some time getting used to the idea that we can be sit closer.
And this is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or shaking hands sometimes.
Yeah, across gender, that wouldn't happen. But even there's a saying that if you're down, if palm doesn't meet palm, they're probably not being friendly, So there are hard handshakes, real fistful handshakes.
Okay.
But they're wonderful people.
And as far as the women, if you want to. If you want to try to show a welcome to some of the women. Now, I've understood that, the culture is a little more separate. Men and women do things sort of separately. Yeah. Women stay home more. And that, the way the volunteers are set up, they're trying to set it up with married couples so that, the men will have a man to talk to and the women will have a woman, someone they would feel more comfortable dealing with.
The homes that I went to generally, and it's a culture in that region where male quarters and female quarters in the homes are different. Mardana and Sanana, that's how they call it. So they are different. And generally when you go to homes, you sit with men unless you are very intimate and close family. Otherwise, women sit with women, men sit with men, and that's how it goes. But these families that are coming here, of course, number one, the houses will probably not be built that way. where this kind of separation is possible. But I don't see it like this is more like a cultural thing. There is no real binding principle about it. So,
Okay.
but it is a thing like that women sit with women, men sit with men, and there's a kind of an unseen.
So I shouldn't take it personally.
Yeah, I mean that's the point. It's
It's just try to understand where it comes from.
yeah,
Sounds like.
it comes from like because these are patriarchal cultures where men are supposed to earn and they are supposed to provide for their families and they are supposed to protect their families. That's how I grew up. That's how anyone else grew up. So I assume that a lot of Afghans grew up like this. So I've never been to Afghanistan, but I have friends who are from Afghanistan or who have been to or who live in the northwest of Pakistan, which is the Pashtun belt, which is very similar to Afghanistan, and have been to their homes. It's pretty much the same, but you know, gender segregation is a thing.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like they're doing a lot to get ready for everyone. And are you planning on being very involved when the first couple of families come in?
I am traveling out of country, like and just during the Thanksgiving break, but I remain committed to being a part of it as long as they need us, anytime. Like
Very good. And what would you want people to know more than anything about this effort and about the people who are coming?
they're very loving people. They're some of the best people on earth.
And they're doing something hard.
It's as I said, I cannot even imagine that I cannot go back to the place where I grew up, where my grandparents and their grandparents are buried. I mean, it's a loss that it's very difficult to understand for anyone who's not from the culture because our relationship with the land is very different. So I can just and also the fact that when you're a refugee, it's not a choice. Leaving a home by choice. People like me who are here to get education, we admire this culture. We love this culture. We want to taste it. But for them, for many of them, this wasn't even a matter of choice. So I really think that it's difficult for them. It's going to be difficult for them, but the way I see the community responding, I'm sure they are going to have it. They're going to have a good time.
Okay, so what did you guys think about the second half of that interview? Or what did you guys think about that?
I think Bo and I are supposed to hug more.
Oh no, I did.
I don't think that's what you're supposed to do.
That's not the takeaway. It's interesting. Because he has his perspective, and this is slightly different than someone immigrating here, right? It's you're plucked out. You're not going to see home again, and I think a lot of Americans assume that the best way to be American or get involved or get things is to assimilate, right? Is to just you're going to try and make things as American as possible, as quickly as possible, and then you're good. You're set.
Yes.
And yeah, we're going to have cultural differences that a lot of us just aren't going to be able to wrap our heads around for a little while. But to me, it still sort of comes down to people needed help, so we're helping them. I can understand if the cultural differences seem weird to people, but I don't know why it would have to scare anyone,
Oh, exactly. Salman talks about the warmth of the culture and how people are very friendly and welcoming and all of those things. Having said all that, these are people who've been traumatized. These are people who have left their homes in one of the most traumatic ways possible as refugees, who basically were fleeing for their lives, often with the clothes on their backs. And they've got a lot of adapting to do. The people that I've talked to at Catholic Charities have flat out said there are going to be folks with PTSD There are going to be folks who are really going to struggle for a while. It doesn't mean that we can't talk to people. It doesn't mean that they're not going to want to make friends, that they're not going to want to get out in the community. I think meeting people where they are and being very accepting is how you make that safe for people. That's how you allow them to make those adjustments that they need to make and to adapt in the way they need to adapt in order to be able to live here and move on with their lives. Because that's going to be a huge thing. And again, families with children, these are little kids who are affected. These are whole families. This is going to affect a lot of people, and it's going to, have a ripple effect on our community, our school systems. There'll be positive things. There will be challenges, right?
And I think even the needs changed as they were going, right? I mean, wasn't that part of it? Determined that, they had a lot of donations, but not everything was needed, and some, they ran short on different things. And
absolutely.
Ran long on others. I mean, so what was sort of the changing needs for these families?
Well, that's still the situation, because what we had was people, they came out and they responded. They absolutely did. And they said, basically, we need furniture. We need dishes. We need things like that. Anything you would need to outfit a house. And that's wonderful, except that they get to the point where they're like, okay, we have more bookcases than we need. We have more headboards than we need. We have more,
Or kitchen tables, right?
We don't need a kitchen table. We don't need any more buffets. We don't need china cabinets, whatever it was people might have been donating. They've figured out that there are certain very specific things that are priorities right now that you've got to have just to get these people a place to live where they're going to be comfortable. Bedding and beds is a big one. Twin size beds, queen size beds for the parents are really important. And also bed frames. Something you may not think about is if you've got a bed frame sitting around, if it's not the one with the slats in it, then they also need a box spring, which makes it a little bit more expensive.
Right.
And a little bit more difficult to get. So, just things like that. They're needing very basic stuff that people need to live on or need, to be able to live in a new home. Think of what you would need if you were starting from scratch. And those are really the priority items. But then there's some cultural differences. There are some things. What we're hearing is that, some of the families, they don't necessarily need a kitchen table and chairs. One of the things on the federal list that you're required to provide or to offer is a dining table with a chair for each person. What I've been told is that traditional Afghan families actually sit on the floor a lot. And a lot of times we'll take meals together on the floor. Things will be placed kind of in the middle, and people will just sit there and eat together. What that means is not only do you not need the table and chairs, but it means you have a need for rugs, which is something that has never been factored in. It is not on the federal list at all. And I will tell you, nice area rugs are not cheap. So there are some really interesting things that are coming up. Also, there are individual requests. Sewing machines are something that are being requested by some of the women coming in. And there is an updated list on a Facebook group. There's a local Facebook group called, let me look here, Stillwater Refugee Resettlement. And what they're doing is they are just updating, the needs in terms of items and also the needs in terms of volunteers. They have QR codes listed that will take you to a volunteer application. And there are different requirements for volunteers. One thing they found was that early on there was a lot of excitement and a lot of people said, yes, I want to help. Hundreds of people. But then, a lot of them were, there were a lot of OSU students who did come down and help, but then they had to go home for the summer they had to go home for the holiday break. And, the schedules are somewhat variable, so they may not be available when they're needed. So there still is a need for volunteers. What we're finding is that they were having a little trouble getting some volunteers because all the volunteers were being treated as though they were going to have direct contact with the family. But if you're just going to carry furniture, all you need to do is sign a liability waiver. if you're never going to meet these families, if you're just loading stuff into the storage area. So they figured out they could streamline this, make it a lot easier for people. Yeah. If you want to come down and just help for a couple hours, you don't need to do nearly as much paperwork. You don't need a background check.
You just need to be able to lift things.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You just need to know to lift with your knees, you know. So, yeah. But there are other more sort of niche or specialized needs that they have. Still a need for people who would basically help the caseworkers to meet the needs of the families. There's going to be need moving forward for English language instruction. There will be need for help with transportation. There will be a need for helping people to find employment. Mm-hmm. At some point in the future, right now they're looking at some different options, working with some local institutions to figure out how to get people job ready, and then how to get them placed in those jobs. So maybe working with some local educational institutions like Meridian that already have that infrastructure in place. First you have to get the language skills. And then even after that, I mean, there might be a need for someone to help a little bit more with finding job openings and helping people to figure out, where to find suitable employment. For a place that has very low unemployment and a lot of places with help wanted signs, this could be a great opportunity for employers.
So what kind of jobs are they are they able to do?
It really depends on how good their English skills are, and we don't know what everyone's background is. I mean, there could be people with a lot of education who are able to do, really technical or skilled jobs. There could be people who, haven't had the opportunity to get that because they've been so busy surviving.
Yeah.
So
or they got
really
trade skills already,
absolutely.
Building, construction, all
absolutely.
That. But it all does kind of hinge on having some level of English speaking capability. Like, I know if you just drop me in another non-English country and it was like you've got a month to kind of be able to communicate basic needs and to get a job. Oh man, I can't imagine.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that, Salman talked about is, how difficult a transition this is and everything these folks have given up. I mean, a lot of people around the world over the years have dreamed of being able to come to America, but I don't think anyone dreams of coming to America under these circumstances.
Yeah.
And what has been some of the, I don't know if it's a delay, I don't know what's strategic or intentional, just to, getting that first family in here and then, sort of doing it, not piecemeal, but there's definitely some kind of strategy involved in why they're bringing people in, bit by bit.
Yes. Talking to Mike Fitzgerald, he is the program manager for the Stillwater resettlement project. Basically, Mike wanted to be sure everything was lined up. He's a planner. He wants to be sure everything is in place. He doesn't want to have to, worry or scramble. So, getting people here took a little while. And then the holidays kind of threw a wrench in things because you need volunteers to carry the furniture, to set up the apartments and the houses and things like that. You need, and then as soon as people get here, they're going to need case management, right? Because they need to get to medical appointments. They need transportation to get here, to get there. They need to be able to go buy groceries. He just wanted to have that all in place. So it did move a little slowly at first, but we have the first 4 families now, and we're expecting a few more. And hopefully, as things go, I was told that there are already 9 apartments ready to go, just waiting for people to move into them. So, that it can start moving a little faster now. Everything depends on the families and what their needs are. And that's one of the things that's really come out, is how individual everybody is. And, we should have expected that, right? It all depends on what these people have done before, how familiar they are with dealing with Western cultures, their job experience, their level of English. There are some people who are already fluent English speakers. There are other people who have very little English. Every family has a different level of needs. And the more support a family needs, the fewer families a caseworker can handle at a time. So basically, as more people get lined out, as more people get set up, you can bring new people in. And it really just depends. The first family who came in, I think they're pretty much ready to hit the ground running. They had good English. There's another family that I don't know that the second family's English skills were as strong, or at least not all of them. So, it's going to be really variable. That's part of the thing. And so it really, they're going to have to be adaptable like everybody. They're going to have to be really flexible. And that means that you can make plans, but you don't know if it's going to work when you actually plug in all these variables and you get the real people involved in it.
And I think if we zoom out a bit, Oklahoma's third behind California and Texas for the amount of
Yes.
resettlement that's going to happen here?
Yes, I was originally it was 1,850, and I believe Catholic Charities is handling 1,850. But then early on, I was told that there is a synagogue in Tulsa that has agreed to sponsor 50 more. So we're looking at a total of 1,850 people being resettled in Oklahoma, which is we're behind only Texas and California, which are much bigger states, much bigger population. So per capita, we're taking a lot more people. And, Governor Stitt basically said, we welcome you. I mean, he made a public statement. And I hope that people will be welcoming. I mean, to be realistic, there have been a few comments that were less than welcoming on social media. Of course, you always have people who are going to do that. But overall, the people who are organizing this effort are incredibly heartened by the response they're getting from the community and the level of interest and the level of support.
What do we know of how any of the families or individuals feel upon arriving in Stillwater, or what they think of Stillwater? Do we know anything of what the families think of Stillwater yet, the ones who are here?
I will say I have not been able to talk to any of the families yet. That's something that I've been working on.
Our next chapter, right?
Yes, that's something that I've been working on, simply because, everyone's being really protective of people right now. For one thing, I think just to give them some time, some breathing space, right? Because we've talked about the trauma. These are people who've been, they've been dealing with very difficult circumstances. They've got kids. They've got to be sure everybody's okay, and they've got to breathe for a minute and feel safe. I did get an anecdote from the caseworker who talked about taking the family that she was working with to the Himalayan grocery store, which is an international market that provides food for from cultures, everywhere really, from Africa.
This is in Stillwater.
It's in Stillwater. Everywhere from Africa to South Asia to the Middle East. And a lot of it would be things that people who are Muslim would be familiar with. They offer some halal food, which means that it's allowed under Islamic dietary guidelines. And she made the comment that taking that family into that store where they could see familiar foods, where they could see maybe even some brands that they were familiar with, or some packaging that was written in a language that they could read, that was their language. She said it was the first time she saw them relax a little bit.
Just sort of a tension leaving the body.
Exactly.
Visibly. Yeah.
The first time it seemed like maybe they felt even a tiny bit at home. So anything, and I think we just have to be aware of that what folks have been through. And I know I'm emphasizing that, but I just don't feel like we can overemphasize it. I'm really, flat out, and hopefully anyone who's bothering to listen to this, is an empathetic person. But I'm really actively begging people for empathy and just human kindness, because I don't want to, I don't want to see the worst happen. And there's precedents for this. Randy Kluver, who works with OSU School of Global Studies, was a kid in the 1970s in Clinton, Oklahoma, when a lot of Vietnamese refugees were settled in Clinton, which is a smallish town in western Oklahoma. there are no Vietnamese families left in Clinton, Oklahoma now because it never felt like home. They never settled in. They never became part of the community. They went to bigger cities. A lot of them went to Houston, to different places like that. And certainly some of the folks who are coming here will eventually go to other places. Maybe they will have friends or family who will be settled in other cities, and they will go to be near them. But there is the opportunity here to really enrich Stillwater as a community and to show, I think I've said this before, that we're the people we think we are. That, to live up to our own hype, right? To show that we really are the folks we want to be. And so I think that our community will do that. It has done that so far.
I think from at least hearing from Mr. Rafique,
Yes.
They sound like they're loving people, and I mean that fits in with, I think, for what Stillwater tries to be too. Like, I mean, it seems like they should fit in at that like heart level with the community.
The people that I've been talking to say that, really when you have people who come in as immigrants, even as refugees, with very few resources available to them at first, that there's a tremendous energy there. And that these folks generally, when they look at the economic impact even of bringing new people into your community, they fill jobs. They're more likely to open businesses. They will repay any assistance that they receive many, many, many times over through either the taxes they pay or the wages that they generate for other people as they start their own businesses. So, I mean, I think it really is it's an opportunity for our community in so many ways.
So, for anyone listening now, how can they help? I mean, what's left to do as far as donations or volunteering? What's immediate, what's long term?
Basically, the best thing to do, honestly, is to follow on social media. There is a group called Stillwater Refugee Resettlement. It is a closed Facebook group, which means not anybody can post, but you can see it. You can read the updates, and they will have the most updated information on the types of volunteers that are needed, on the types of goods and items that are needed. That's probably the most efficient way to do it. OSU is also helping with they have a web page set up for what they call the Afghan Family Project Stillwater. And if you just Google that, it will take you to that page on the OSU website. And that also has a lot of information. And one thing I would like to point out is that they have information on how you can make monetary donations. And that's going to be really big. This is something that comes up over and over again. Money, it's always the right size. It's always the right color. The whole thing is it allows the flexibility to meet unanticipated needs. It fills gaps. Because you can donate a lot of things, but sometimes something will come up that no one ever anticipated. Or, there's a health issue. Or someone needs a medication or something like that.
Well, not only that, if you can do it through a sort of, nonprofit or government,
sure,
they can get things maybe with tax-free status. There's, they can stretch that dollar more than we could if we went and bought, a bunch of water or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They can donate through Catholic Charities, which is a nonprofit. So that's a really good thing. The other thing is gift cards. I mean, they're asking people to just donate $50 gift cards that families can use at either the Himalayan grocery store or at Walmart to buy the foods that they want, the things that they need. And again, just to fill those gaps. So that flexibility there, if you don't know what else to do, honestly, if you can spare $50, if you can spare $20, making that donation will go a long way. That will really help a lot.
All right. Our thanks to Salman Rafique. An extensive interview. Really opened up for us. So
absolutely.
That was nice. And everyone who's talked to us and pitched in and all that stuff. And those listening now. thank you for joining us in the newsroom.
Howdy, folks. Just want to remind you that you can get your free Studio Stillwater sticker by going to studiostillwater.net. Click on the link at the top of the page and fill out the information, and we will send you your free sticker. This podcast is made possible with support from the Stillwater News Press. Please consider subscribing to our award-winning newspaper and help support local journalism. Go to stwnewspress.com to sign up. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.